My child, I saw how you looked away today. The conversation wasn't even about you, but your heart reacted before your mind could filter it. Someone spoke of walking in their calling, of finally stepping into their purpose, and you smiled like you were fine. But inside, your chest tightened. Not because you're bitter, not because you've stopped believing in me, but because a part of you quietly wondered if you were supposed to be further along by now. It wasn't envy. It was loss. A subtle, silent ache that's been sitting just beneath the surface. Not loud, but persistent. Not dramatic, but real. That ache didn't begin today. It's been forming over time, layered with questions you never fully voiced. You've tried to convince yourself it doesn't matter. You've told yourself that obedience is enough, that being faithful is better than being seen. And that's true. But deep down, you're not disappointed because no one sees you. You're disappointed because you don't see where this is going anymore. You don't see how all the small obediences, all the internal yeses, all the sacrifices and pauses and private prayers could possibly still add up to something that resembles calling. That's where I come in now. You haven't missed your calling? Not because you made all the right choices, or because you stayed perfectly in line every step of the way. You haven't missed it because I'm the one who called you, and I don't revoke what I place on a life. You're treating your calling like it's something fragile, like a train you could miss if you don't sprint hard enough. You think if you hesitated, you lost it. If you wandered, you forfeited it. If you stopped, it passed you by. But I don't move like that. I don't operate on human timelines. I don't discard people because of delays. You're judging yourself through the lens of earthly efficiency, but I move by eternal intention. My purpose in you was never time-sensitive. It was root-sensitive. You see, I never rushed your process because I wasn't only preparing what you'd do, I was preparing who you'd become. I care more about your formation than your performance. And what's been forming in you, quietly, deeply, invisibly to others, is exactly what makes you ready now. The parts of you that didn't make sense in earlier seasons are beginning to fit. You didn't miss it. You were being shaped to carry it without breaking under the weight of it. I'm not looking for perfection in your history. I'm looking for surrender in your present. If you knew how many of my assignments begin after the world assumes a person is done, you'd stop disqualifying yourself every time you feel behind. I know the moments that make you doubt. When you think back to doors you didn't walk through, words you were afraid to speak, decisions you made that were safer than they were spirit-led. You carry those like invisible proof that you missed your window, but you're looking at isolated events. I see the whole story. I see the way you came back. I see the way you softened again when you could have hardened. I see the tears that never made it into your journals, the prayers that were more groan than language. I count those. I build from those. You haven't missed your calling. You're closer now than you've ever been, because now you don't want it for recognition. You want it to respond. You want to move because I'm moving, not because others are watching. And that is the most dangerous kind of obedience to the kingdom of darkness. The kind that doesn't depend on applause, the kind that doesn't need external validation, the kind that comes from a heart that is quiet enough to hear me and brave enough to follow. You don't need to re-earn the future I've written. You just need to agree with it again. You've been waiting for a moment, for a door, for a prophetic confirmation loud enough to silence your doubt. But the confirmation has already come. It's the way your heart still stirs when you hear certain words. It's the way you feel pulled toward the work even after all this time. It's the way you can't stop caring about the very things you've tried to release. That's not coincidence. That's calling. Still alive, still active, still waiting for your participation. And I know how tired you are. I know how wary you've become of re-engaging with this vision. I know what it cost you last time you tried. You gave more than you had, and the silence afterward felt cruel. You trusted and were misunderstood. You hoped and were met with delay. So you learned to lower your expectations, not of me, but of yourself. You told yourself maybe your role was to support, not to step out. Maybe you were just meant to intercede for others, not be sent yourself. But I never gave you that boundary. You did, and I'm lifting it now. Gently, firmly. You haven't been left behind. You've been held back on purpose, not by me as punishment, but by my love as preparation. I know what I'm doing with your life. I know when to release you. I know how to stretch your timeline so that it doesn't just bring fruit, but fruit that remains. And I will not send you until the weight of your character can hold the influence of your assignment. But now, we're nearing that threshold. That's why you feel the stirring again. That's why the ache is louder. The water is moving again. And I'm still asking what I've always asked. Not for your plan, not for your perfection, but for your yes. You've heard the word calling so often that it started to sound abstract, almost unreachable. Over time, it became a word tied to people with microphones, platforms, or titles. You stopped seeing it as something personal, something close. You stopped recognizing that calling is not something handed to the elite. It's something whispered to the available. And you've always been available, even in your exhaustion, even in your hiding. Even in the places where you felt disqualified, some part of you kept asking, is there still more for me? There is, and it's not behind you. Let me clear this up now. Your calling didn't get buried under past mistakes or missed chances. It's not sitting behind the version of you that existed 5 or 10 years ago. I don't tether your purpose to the moment you felt the most anointed. I anchor it to my voice. And my voice doesn't expire when you stumble. It doesn't go silent when you detour. It waits, patiently, powerfully, until you're ready to respond again. And I can see it. You're beginning to respond again. Not outwardly, maybe not publicly, but inside, your heart is leaning forward. The resistance is weakening. You've stopped asking me to explain everything, and you've started asking me to show you the next step. That's where your strength is returning. Not in having all the answers, but in being willing to move again. You don't need a map. You need moment-by-moment trust. That's where calling is lived out. Not in the clarity of what's 10 years ahead, but in the courage to obey today. You've learned to mistrust your sense of timing, and I understand why. You thought you heard me before and still ended up disappointed. You stepped out in seasons where the ground didn't hold, and it's made you hesitant, even with the new stirring. That hesitation isn't rebellion, it's grief. Grief for what didn't unfold, for the cost no one else saw, for the moments where it felt like you stepped in faith and heaven stayed silent. I didn't abandon you in those moments. I was watching how you responded, not because I needed proof of your faithfulness, but because you needed depth. And depth doesn't form in clarity. Depth is born in places where you choose to stay close to me even when nothing makes sense. And you did. You didn't quit. Even if you slowed down, even if you sat down for a while, you never walked away. That matters, more than you think. And now something is shifting. You can feel it, subtle but undeniable. The way your heart wakes up when certain conversations happen, the way ideas return that you thought were long gone, the way your spirit reacts to injustice, to beauty, to longing, not as a consumer, but as someone who was meant to respond. That is the sound of calling resurfacing. Not the calling you imagined in your early years, the one shaped by image, speed, and validation. This is something different, more grounded, more eternal. This is the version of your calling that can't be measured by how others respond to it. It can only be measured by your obedience. And that's what I want you to understand now. Your calling doesn't require you to be known by many. It requires you to be known by me and still say yes. If no one ever applauds, if no one ever affirms it from a stage, if no one ever invites you forward, would you still go if you knew it was me asking? Because I am. And you know it. That's why you can't shake this feeling. That's why the ache hasn't left. It's not ambition. It's not emotion. It's my spirit reminding you that I've placed something in you that hasn't been activated yet. Or maybe it was once activated and then paused. Either way, I'm not done with it. I'm not done with you. You haven't missed your moment. The truth is, you were never meant to live in a single moment. You were designed to live in continual communion. That's what calling is. Ongoing participation with me in the world. One act of obedience at a time. Sometimes it looks like bold steps. Sometimes it looks like invisible faithfulness. Both are holy. Both are powerful. Both change things in the spirit long before they ever show up in the natural. I want to set you free from the belief that you need to feel ready. You don't. You need to feel connected. And you are. Even your uncertainty has become a place of communion with me. I'm not asking you to stand on a platform and declare a grand vision. I'm asking you to respond today. Start the conversation. Open the journal. Pray the prayer. Forgive the delay. Trust the nudge. Take the small step. Calling doesn't wait for you to be finished growing. It begins when you start walking in alignment with who I already say you are. You are my witness, my vessel, my image bearer, and yes, my messenger, not because of your skill, because of your surrender. You haven't missed your calling. You're remembering how to walk in it, one sacred step at a time. There's something we need to name now, not to shame you, but to set you free. You've carried a quiet fear that no one else sees. It's not just fear of failure. It's deeper than that. It's the fear that you're fundamentally out of sync, that something in you is permanently misaligned, and everyone else moved on while you stayed stuck. This fear hasn't shouted. It's whispered, subtly, repetitively. It shows up when you hear someone younger stepping into their assignment. It comes when you're asked what you're passionate about, and you don't know how to answer anymore. It sneaks into the gap between your desire to obey me and your uncertainty about where you even stand. You feel the weight of possibility, but also the burden of regret. And somewhere along the way, that tension hardened into a conclusion that was never true. Maybe I just missed it. Let's break that together, because what you've really been battling isn't missed opportunity. It's disorientation. And disorientation is a spiritual condition, not a moral failure. It happens when pain disrupts your sense of direction. When disappointment clouds what used to feel certain. When the hope you once carried becomes something you protect instead of pursue, just in case it breaks again. You've confused delay with denial. You've mistaken silence for abandonment. You've believed that because you no longer feel the same fire, the purpose must have died. But it didn't. What died was the form you expected it to take. The version of calling you built around recognition, around speed, around a youthful sense of linear progress. That's not failure. That's growth. You're not the person you were when you first sensed I was calling you. You're deeper now. You've suffered and stayed. You've doubted, but returned. You've stopped pretending you're okay when you're not. And that's not regression. That's maturity. That's the kind of soil where real calling takes root. Not the image-driven kind, not the stage-dependent kind. The kind that bears fruit no matter who's watching, because it's nourished by communion, not attention. But in that growing, something else happened. Because you no longer feel what you used to feel, you've assumed that your capacity is gone. But your calling was never built on emotion. It was built on my intention. And intention doesn't fluctuate with your energy. It doesn't vanish in seasons of confusion. It holds. I hold. What you're feeling now, this low-grade ache, this sense that you should be moving but don't know where to go, is not proof that you failed. It's proof that your spirit is starting to recognize the shift. Something stirring again. Slowly. Carefully. Without fanfare. But it's happening. And as it does, you're realizing just how much fear you've internalized around movement. You don't trust your instincts anymore. Not after the closed doors, not after being misunderstood, not after praying boldly and seeing nothing change. You've trained yourself to wait for outside confirmation because you don't want to misstep again. But I never asked you to be afraid of movement. I asked you to be sensitive to me, and I'm retraining that now. You're not disqualified, you're being retrained. Gently, intentionally, I'm helping you distinguish the sound of my voice from the echo of your past. This is the reason you feel tension when you try to say yes again. Not because you're unwilling, but because your internal compass has been clouded by lies you didn't know you were believing. If it didn't work last time, it won't work now. If I didn't respond when I had momentum, I don't deserve another chance. If I try again, I'll just end up exhausted again. But I'm not the voice of shame. I'm the voice that called Moses after exile. The voice that restored Peter after denial. The voice that called Samuel in the quiet. The voice that whispered to Elijah in a cave when he thought his story was finished. And I'm speaking to you now, not to hype you up, but to heal your inner rhythm so you can trust me again. That healing begins with truth. Your calling was never something you could sabotage beyond redemption. It was never earned in the first place. It was given. And I don't take back what I've placed in my children. I refine it. I shape it. I protect it when needed. I reposition it when the heart is ready. And your heart is ready. That's why you feel this holy discomfort. That's why it feels harder to stay passive than it does to move. That's why you've begun to look at what once exhausted you and think, maybe I could return to that. Differently this time. It's not just memory, it's not nostalgia, it's me reigniting something that never actually went out. It just went underground for a while. But roots have grown, and now the ground is shifting. So no, you haven't missed your calling. You've finally come to the edge of the lie that tried to define you. And now, if you're willing, we begin again. Now that the lie is weakening, the one that told you you were too late, too inconsistent, too unclear, I want to talk to you about what's already shifting in you. Because even before you fully believed me again, you started responding. Not outwardly, not in big visible ways, but internally, subtly. Your responses have been happening in the way you've stopped fighting me every time I bring the conversation of purpose back to the surface. In the way you've grown quieter, not from resignation, but from reverence. You sense that something is beginning again, and you don't want to rush it. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's evidence that you're no longer chasing a calling that proves something to others. You're receiving a calling that grows from belonging. You're learning how to walk differently now, not reactively, not frantically, not from the shallow places that once made you overcommit or overcompensate. There's a new steadiness forming. It's not loud, but it's there. You're less interested in being recognized and more interested in being aligned. You care less about being impressive and more about being honest. This is how I prepare people to walk in enduring assignments, not the ones that burn hot and fast, but the ones that last for decades, sometimes even generations. Because the assignment I've placed on your life has weight, and that weight requires structure beneath it, integrity, clarity, inner stillness, not perfection, but resilience. And that resilience wasn't born in success. It was formed in places where you wanted to quit, but didn't. Where you felt overlooked, but remained, where you were misunderstood and still chose love. This is the kind of strength I trust with influence, not the kind that makes noise, but the kind that holds ground. But I know what you're still wondering. How do I start again when I don't feel anything clear? Let me tell you something you forgot. Most callings don't start with clarity. They start with awareness. And awareness is already returning to you. You're becoming aware of what no longer fits, of what you can't ignore anymore. You're becoming aware of the weight you carry when certain people speak, or when certain needs surface. You're noticing how your heart breaks in specific directions. These are not random impressions. These are indicators, these are signs. This is me, awakening your assignment piece by piece. You don't need to name it yet. You don't need a mission statement. I'm not asking for a brand. I'm asking for a response. Right where you are, in the simplicity of ordinary life. I'm asking for your permission to bring it back. Not in a rush, but with precision. I don't rebuild on shallow foundations. And now that you've been broken open in the best way, now that pride and performance are no longer your motivators, I can entrust you with more. Here's what's coming. Small nudges that grow, opportunities that don't look like doors at first, conversations that pull more out of you than you expected, assignments that seem minor but carry eternal weight, invitations to places where your voice will matter more than your presence, moments when your discernment kicks in faster than it used to, and you'll know it wasn't your instinct. It was my spirit, sharpened in you through the stillness. And as that unfolds, you'll realize something essential. You didn't miss your moment. You simply weren't meant to step into it from the version of yourself that was still unsure if you belonged. Now you know better. Now you're not just available, you're anchored. This is the version of you I've been waiting for. Not because you finally arrived, but because you finally stopped running. And now we can walk forward together, not into performance, but into presence. Not into pressure, but into peace. Not into frantic doing, but into eternal significance. Calling is not measured by how busy you are. It's measured by how obedient you are to the quietest nudge. That's the path we're on now, and it leads somewhere deeper than you expected. But first, just keep walking. I'm still with you, and I always will be. Let's come into the present now, not just spiritually, but practically, because I want your calling to be more than a concept. I want it to become movement. And movement doesn't always start on a platform. Sometimes it starts in your calendar, in your choices. In the unspoken boundaries, you begin to shift quietly but boldly. That's where authority starts to take shape, not just in what you say yes to, but in what you finally give yourself permission to say no to. I want to talk about what drains you, not the major crises, but the subtle leaks, the emotional obligations you never questioned, the way you've said yes to things just to protect your image as helpful, humble, safe. The commitments you took on because you didn't want to disappoint anyone, even when you knew I didn't ask you to carry them. This is the hidden weight that has cost you clarity. And part of walking in your calling now is reclaiming your capacity. You cannot discern your next steps if you are still entangled in assignments I never gave you. Calling requires space. You can't host my presence at full volume when you're living at full depletion. I don't ask you to burn out to prove your faithfulness. I ask you to be faithful to what I actually gave you. Not what others expect from you, not what guilt demands of you, not what shame whispers is your responsibility to fix. So here's a hard truth wrapped in my gentleness. You've carried things out of loyalty that were never yours to carry in love. And now, as I call you forward, those things will feel heavier. Not because you're failing, but because you're finally recognizing that they don't belong to your future. Let them go. Not with bitterness, not with explanation. Simply with alignment. Some relationships will change, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. Some routines will feel foreign, not because you're losing your rhythm, but because I'm giving you a new one. You're not being irresponsible. You're becoming available to me. And as you create space again, you'll notice something return that's been missing for a while. Joy, not circumstantial, not reactive. Joy that comes from knowing you're standing exactly where you're meant to be, even if you don't know what's next. Joy that's born not from certainty, but from connection. Because calling isn't about control, it's about communion. You've tried to organize your life around energy before, around needs, around productivity. But I'm inviting you now to organize it around presence. Mine, yours, ours. Because when you live from presence, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop striving and start partnering. You stop chasing identity and start embodying it. That's what this moment is. It's not the relaunch of something old. It's the reformation of your inner rhythm. A new way of living in step with me. A pace that doesn't require you to sacrifice your soul in order to make an impact. A life where your body is not just a tool for service, but a vessel for my glory. A routine where rest is not the reward at the end, but the fuel that sustains every beginning. Let's get specific. Your calling will touch everything. Your work, your words, your relationships, your attention. And I want it to start today, in how you schedule your time, in how you discern which voices you allow to speak into you, in how you protect your mornings, in how you quiet your nights. This isn't legalism. This is formation. This is your life taking shape around your purpose. Not your wounds, not your fears, not your old patterns. You can feel it already, can't you? That internal line drawing itself between who you were and who you're becoming. That shift where the old reactions no longer feel satisfying and the new decisions still feel fragile, but good. That's the sign. You're not forcing your way forward anymore. You're aligning. And alignment is what makes space for authority. You haven't missed your calling. You're finally building a life that can carry it. Now that your internal space is being cleared, it's time to talk about identity, not the roles you've played, not the hats you've worn, not the versions of yourself that were crafted to survive hard seasons. I'm talking about the unchanging, eternal essence of who you are. The you that I spoke into being before time wrapped itself around your days. Because here's what I need you to see. Much of what you called calling before was built on compensation, trying to make up for what you feared you lacked, trying to become someone impressive so you wouldn't feel invisible, trying to do something meaningful so you wouldn't feel replaceable. You wrapped effort around insecurity and called it purpose. You wrapped performance around fear and called it faithfulness. And you ran so long and so hard, trying to live up to an idea of who you thought you had to be, that you lost touch with who I actually created. But that's changing now. You're no longer trying to live up to a version of yourself. You're returning to the one I've been holding all along. I never called you the strong one because you didn't need help. I called you strong because you kept coming back to me when everything else told you to quit. I never asked you to be the available one for everyone else's needs. I asked you to be present to my voice. I never named you by your gifting, your work, or your usefulness. I named you mine. And before your gifts ever showed up, I saw your heart. You don't need to earn your identity again. You need to stop negotiating with lies that made you believe you were only as valuable as your performance. You are not the one who failed to meet expectations. You are the one who kept showing up when no one clapped. You are not the one who missed their window. You are the one who waited long enough to be released in my time, not theirs. You are not the one who took too long. You are the one who took your time to grow deep roots. Let this sink in. You're not behind. You're becoming, slowly, deliberately. And now that you've stopped using activity to hide your uncertainty, I can finally uncover the truth of who you are beneath it all. You're not lost. You've just been hidden. And I hide the things I value most, not to withhold them, but to protect them until the world is ready to receive them rightly. That's what I've been doing with you. The silence wasn't rejection. It was refinement. The delay wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The obscurity wasn't failure, it was formation. And now what I'm calling out of you isn't another version of someone you admire. It's the truest version of the person I designed. One who doesn't need to chase worth. One who no longer carries the burden of comparison. One who finally understands that what I place in someone is not a performance to protect. It's a presence to carry. And you, beloved, carry my presence. That's what makes your voice different. That's what makes your timing sacred. That's what makes your yes weighty. And this is why the old definitions no longer feel comfortable. Because you've outgrown them. You're no longer content to be who you thought you had to be to survive. You're ready to be who you were always meant to be. Before fear told you to shrink. Before disappointment made you doubt. Before exhaustion made you forget. That version of you is emerging now. And as you walk in your calling from that place, you will move differently. You won't need validation as fuel. You won't crave clarity like control. You'll live from peace, and you'll speak with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they belong. Not because they arrived at the right place, but because they returned to the right identity. So no, you haven't missed your calling. You're finally becoming someone who can walk in it unmasked. Now that the layers are falling away, the masks, the pressure, the false urgency, I want to show you how to begin walking again. Not the kind of walking that exhausts you, but the kind that grounds you. This part of your calling won't be awakened by adrenaline or ambition. It will rise from consistency, from humility, from your willingness to move forward slowly, honestly, without needing to rush. You used to think activation would feel like fire, like a powerful burst of direction or some prophetic crescendo that would make all hesitation disappear. But I don't always move in flashes of light. I often move in rhythm, in steps, in daily surrender. Not because I lack power, but because I'm more interested in shaping you than impressing you. You don't need a dramatic re-entry. You need a sustainable rhythm of intimacy. So this is where we begin again. Not at the finish line, but in the ordinary. You've already felt me stirring you in moments that seem small. The urge to open your journal again, the conviction to revisit a conversation you avoided, the renewed interest in something you once loved, but let go. These aren't coincidences. They're invitations. They're me calling you back into alignment, not all at once, but gently, faithfully, with every breath. Because I know what you're still afraid of. You're afraid that if you try again, you'll burn out again. That if you say yes, you'll be pulled into more than you can handle. That obedience will cost your peace. But I'm not calling you back into chaos. I'm calling you into order, into clarity, into rhythms of life that don't drain you, but sustain you. That means you'll need to protect your space differently. You'll need to listen more closely to when I say stop, not just when I say go. I'll lead you into stillness just as often as I lead you into action. And sometimes your greatest act of obedience will be to remain where I placed you, even when no one else sees movement. Especially then. Let me tell you this plainly. Your calling doesn't require you to hustle. It requires you to trust. To trust that I'll open the right doors when your heart is ready. To trust that the seeds you're planting in the dark are not being ignored. To trust that the strength you feel returning little by little is real. You're not imagining it. You're healing. You're maturing. You're entering the part of your life where fruit doesn't come from striving, but from remaining. That's what I meant when I said, "Abide in me and you will bear much fruit." Not just visible success, but the kind of fruit that nourishes others without draining you. Wisdom, patience, discernment, clarity, peace. And, yes, boldness, too. But the kind of boldness that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that simply shows up when I say move. You've prayed for clarity before, but what you really needed wasn't a clearer vision. It was a clearer pathway to live in step with me. And now I'm teaching you that path. A quiet discipline of attention. A sacred awareness of what's mine and what's not. A rhythm of decision-making that isn't based on what feels urgent, but what's true. Some days, walking in your calling will look like speaking up when you would have stayed silent. Some days it will look like resting when others run. Some days it will look like choosing obscurity with me over visibility without me. And each time, it will remind you, you are not who you were when you thought you missed it. You're not starting over, you're starting from depth. And that depth will guide you. It will filter your yes. It will purify your motives. It will strengthen your resolve when doubt comes knocking again. Because even though your emotions will fluctuate, and they will, your footing will be secure, not in certainty, but in me. And that is where true calling lives. You haven't missed it. You're just finally moving at the speed of trust. Now we begin to move from the internal to the external, not with haste, but with intention, because what's been happening in your heart is already affecting the atmosphere around you. You may not have realized it yet, but the people closest to you can sense the difference. Your words are carrying more weight. Your presence brings a kind of peace that wasn't there before. And even your silence holds authority. Not because you've mastered anything, but because you've returned to alignment. That's how my glory rests, on people who aren't desperate to prove anything anymore. I've always been drawn to yielded vessels, not polished ones. And now that you're walking in deeper communion, I can trust you with what I've been preparing. Not a sudden explosion of influence, but a gradual, undeniable unfolding. Because I'm not interested in quick success stories. I'm writing lasting legacies. And you, beloved, are part of one. That means the opportunities I'm bringing won't just be next steps, they'll be right steps. They may look small, but they'll be filled with eternal purpose. A conversation that shifts someone's path. A choice that disrupts a generational cycle. A whisper of encouragement that becomes a lifeline for someone else. Don't underestimate the reach of your obedience just because it's not public. I've always moved most powerfully through those who are willing to be hidden long enough to be trusted. This is the season where I begin to reveal what I've built in you beneath the surface. You thought nothing was growing, but I was forming roots deep enough to hold the kind of influence that doesn't collapse under pressure. Influence that doesn't need to market itself. Influence that doesn't require platform, only presence. As you step further into this rhythm, your discernment will increase. You'll recognize doors I didn't open. You'll notice opportunities that once would have flattered your ego, but now feel hollow. And you'll also sense what is truly from me, because it will carry peace, even if it also carries weight. It will draw you into greater dependence, not greater busyness. It will challenge you, but it will never crush your spirit. My yoke is still easy. My burden is still light. So be ready, because I'm placing things in your path that will require decisions you couldn't have made even a year ago, not because you weren't willing, but because you weren't whole enough to recognize them. But now you're not responding from fear or ambition. You're responding from truth. And truth is a dangerous thing in the hands of someone fully yielded to me. You may still feel unqualified. That's normal. But let me be clear. I'm not sending you out alone. I'm sending you out with me. My spirit is going before you, preparing hearts and conversations. You don't need to strategize every outcome. Just be faithful. Just keep showing up. Just keep living like someone who believes they are still sent. Because you are. And what I'm doing through you won't be forced. It will flow. Because it's not performance. It's permission. You've given me permission to reshape everything, and now I'm giving you permission to release everything I've placed in you. Without apology, without delay, without needing anyone else to confirm what I've already made clear. I've given you insight, not just for yourself, but for others. And as you continue walking in your assignment, you'll become an atmosphere shifter. Not because of charisma, but because of consistency. Your faithfulness will do more in silence than most people's noise ever could. So don't be surprised when things open. Don't question whether you're ready. You've been in the fire long enough. You've been refined, not for status, but for stewardship. And now I'm entrusting you with what was always meant for you. You haven't missed your calling. You've been prepared to carry it with clarity, courage, and peace. Let me speak now to the moments that are still coming, because even as you begin to walk in what I've been restoring, there will be resistance. Not because you're off track, but because the atmosphere around you will recognize that something's different. You're no longer operating in confusion. You're moving in clarity. You're no longer second-guessing your worth. You're standing on it. And when you live like that, when you walk in the quiet confidence that I've sent you, resistance comes, but it won't derail you anymore. You've been through enough to know the signs. The enemy won't need to destroy your plans. He'll try to distract your focus. He'll stir comparison when your path looks different than others. He'll whisper doubts when fruit doesn't appear right away. He'll use familiar voices, even internal ones, to echo old lies. Maybe you're still not ready. Maybe this is too late. Maybe you should have stayed quiet. But now you'll recognize it. Now you'll catch it before it sinks. Because you know what my voice sounds like, and that isn't it. My voice doesn't produce panic. My voice doesn't pull you into shame. My voice doesn't accuse. My voice builds, secures, convicts with gentleness, and confirms with peace. And when the noise rises, you'll know how to return. Quickly, quietly, intentionally. That's the power of alignment. It's not that you never feel unsure, it's that you know where to go when you do. You're no longer dependent on signs and confirmations to know you're walking rightly. You've built history with me now. Enough to walk in quiet obedience when no one is watching. Enough to keep showing up when the room is empty. Enough to speak the words I give you without adjusting them for acceptance. That's authority. And you didn't gain it from platforms. You gained it in the silence. So when I bring you into rooms that once intimidated you, you'll stand differently. Not with arrogance, but with rest. You won't need to over-explain your presence. You won't need to soften your convictions to be palatable. You won't shrink back when others don't understand. Because you'll remember, I called you here. And if I sent you, then it's not your job to manage how others respond. It's your job to remain faithful. You'll also begin to notice how I've already gone ahead of you. Conversations you feared will open with softness. People you assumed would resist you will lean in. Provision will appear, not because you begged for it, but because you obeyed me when no one saw. These aren't coincidences. They are confirmations that when you walk in rhythm with me, fruit finds you. You don't have to chase it. And even when the doors remain closed, even when the feedback is quiet or the outcomes are uncertain, you won't revert. Because you're no longer living for outcome. You're living from obedience. And obedience is its own reward. You know that now. You've tasted the difference between approval and peace. And peace is better. This is what I meant all along when I said I had plans for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans with a future and a hope. You interpreted that through the lens of breakthrough and breakthrough only. But I've always been working for your wholeness. And now that you're walking in it, your hope isn't fragile anymore. It's grounded. And that kind of hope, mature hope, refined hope, becomes contagious. Others will ask you how you found your footing again, and you'll tell them the truth. I never stopped being called. I just stopped agreeing with the lies that said I wasn't. You haven't missed your calling. You're becoming someone who knows how to carry it, with authority, tenderness, and joy, even when no one else understands how far you've come. So let's finish where we began. Not in urgency, not in performance, but in presence. You've come full circle through pain, memory, truth, and renewal. And what remains isn't a burden you have to carry. What remains is a life you get to live in communion with me. This isn't about restarting something old. This is about walking in the continuation of something I never stopped writing. The version of you that began this journey thought calling meant clarity. But now, you know better. Now you understand that calling is about alignment, consistency, and the courage to keep saying yes, even when the fruit hasn't appeared yet. You've traded the addiction to outcomes for the peace of obedience. You've released the timeline and reclaimed the truth. And the truth is, you were never disqualified. You were never passed over. I didn't give your assignment to someone else. I didn't replace you in the waiting. I was building you, and I was building with you, even when you couldn't see it. Every hidden yes, every private surrender, every prayer whispered in exhaustion, I was there, and I was counting it as preparation. You don't need to be afraid of what's ahead anymore. The fear that once made you hesitate is losing its grip. You're learning to move even when you don't have all the answers. You're learning that my presence is enough to confirm the path, even when the results are still unfolding. And that kind of trust makes you unstoppable in the ways that truly matter. Because my kingdom doesn't advance through the loudest voices. It advances through the ones who have been with me. And you've been with me, even when you thought you weren't. Even when all you could do was survive. Even when you barely believed there was still something ahead. I never let go of you. I never removed my hand. And I never once whispered a lesser name over you. Now as you walk forward, I want you to do so with peace. Let peace be your signature. Let gentleness be your strength. Let wisdom, not pressure, be the voice you respond to. You don't need to overcompensate for the years you thought were lost. I am the God who redeems time, not just opportunity. And what I'm restoring in you now won't be rushed, because it doesn't need to be. It's real. You don't have to explain this to everyone. Some won't understand how deeply you've shifted. Some will still view you through the lens of who you were. That's okay. Let me be the one who affirms you. Let me be the one who brings the right people into alignment with your next season. Your job is not to convince. Your job is to continue. So go, not anxiously, not defensively, but fully aware that you were made for this moment, not because you finally arrived, but because you finally returned to truth, to trust, to me. You haven't missed your calling. You've simply matured into someone who can walk in it with quiet fire, with deep roots, and with unshakable peace. Amen. If this reached the place in you that quietly questioned whether you were still called, let it keep going. Someone else needs the truth you just remembered. Pass it on, not as a post, but as a message, a witness, a breath. Share what reached you. It might be the rescue someone else is still waiting for.